Welcome in. It's week 7. It is the Football Guys DFS show, and we're going to dive into your slates for primarily DraftKings. We'll hit FanDuel as well. We'll run through your cash games, your GPP plays. We'll look at games of the week. We'll look at stacks we like, and we'll look at discount plays we like. But I'm here with my good friend Phil Alexander and with our DFS captain, Devin Knotts, and myself, Jeff Bell.
I'm not a good friend, Jeff.
Of course you are, Devin. and Phil and I's teams played the other night, and my team was able to knock off Phil's team. The Buffalo Bills were able to beat the New York Jets, but we saw the Jets and Bills both make big trades after that game, with the Jets getting Devontae Adams, the Bills getting Amari Cooper, and so that's a lot of fun things, moving pieces that we saw in the NFL as not really normal this week. But Phil, kind of what games are you watching this week coming out of those big trades and maybe some other movement?
Yeah, this is an interesting slate. It's a little bit short for a main slate. We've got a London game this week again, and it's one of those weeks with 2 Monday nighters. Plus, we got the teams on bye, so only 10 games, and I'd say about half of them have tournament intrigue. I know that I usually keep a fairly long list of games here that I'm into, but I think it's going to be justified this week. First one is Panthers at Commanders. That's got the highest over-under on the slate at 52. Commanders are big favorites there, but I think we're going to see that there are several Panthers mispriced or at least affordably priced. So I think I could have created a cash game lineup with like 4 Panthers if I really wanted to. The second one, I don't want to, by the way. The second one was Seahawks at Falcons. Falcons favored by 3, 51-point total. And that's actually up in the last day or two. I think that opened around 48.5. So the folks out there are betting that one up for a lot of points. A third game with a total over 50, and this one is projected close. You got Lions at Vikings with a 50.5-point total. Vikings favored by 1.5 points. I would say those 3 are probably the cream of the crop, but Texans at Packers, 47.5-point total. Packers favored by 3. That one could certainly shoot out with 2 good quarterbacks on both sides of the ball. And in my somewhat interesting category, we've got is this a Super Bowl rematch? Chiefs at 49ers?
It is a Super Bowl rematch.
That is a Super Bowl rematch. It remains to be seen with these offenses this season. They've each run into some issues, but over-unders at 47. Games in San Francisco with a 1.5-point spread in favor of the 49ers. So I think you have to give that game some consideration for points. But yeah, we got 5 strong games, 3 with over-unders over 50. I think that might be the most 50-plus point totals for a slate on the season. And we've only got 10 games, so it should be a fun one.
Devin, do any of the 2 teams that Phil didn't mention interest you?
I feel like I need to play the Jeopardy music while Phil is talking because it's just
that's good.
Or a shot clock. He says which games you like, not which games are going to be high scoring. I don't really care. Let's get into players.
All right. Before we do that, please take a moment to like and subscribe. And we've done a lot of giveaways. I don't think we're going to do one this week, maybe coming out of this week. We'll have to talk about that. But we can dive into now your cash game plays. And where are you going to go at quarterback here, Devin?
Drop a comment. What should we give away next? What should we give away?
Let us know.
Anything your heart desires. And whether or not we do that is going to entirely depend on the price range of what you recommend. But get creative.
All right, Devin, cash game quarterback. Who are you going to go with?
That's a good question. I'm going to go, as we stand here on Wednesday night, I'm going to go Sam Darnold, Jeff. 6,200. Taking on the Detroit Lions, who can't stop the pass. They're a very good run defense, but we'll talk about the ability for the Minnesota Vikings to run the ball, and it's not looking overly promising. So I think Darnold is in the best spot. I mean, certainly you could go up to, Jaden Daniels, but I don't really like that as much because I prefer running backs against Carolina, and at 7,600, he's a little bit too expensive. Yeah, so Darnold it is for me. I think it's a pretty clear 1-1. I'm certain that Phil will probably talk a little bit about Geno Smith, and I have no issues there. But Detroit, allowed 2 300-yard games. They looked better last week against Dallas, but that just entire game was a disaster for Dallas from the start. Something isn't right.
Yeah, I think something isn't right in Dallas, and I think that the Lions were. Sorry, you're cutting out, so I don't mean to cut you out.
Good.
No, I was going to say something's not right in Dallas, and I think the Lions were extra motivated for that game. You mentioned Geno Smith. Geno Smith was at the top of my list when I went through. And Phil, is that your play, or do you have another one that you're targeting?
Yeah, I landed in pretty much the same spot as Devin, and that's if I could get to 6,200 for Darnold, I think I will. We record on Wednesdays, so it's like a familiar refrain to hear us say that there's not a lot of value that's opened up, but that's because it usually opens up later in the week, and that allows us to spend up to some of our targets. But as I was constructing it as of tonight, I'd love to get to Jaden Daniels. I don't think I'm going to be able to now that he's the highest priced quarterback on the slate. I think that's more of a luxury purchase that you make for GPPs, but Darnold has more or less 3x this salary in every game this season, except for the one in London against the Jets in their last game before the bye. This one's at home. They're rested. They've got the Lions coming in. The Lions are now with a weakened pass rush with Aiden Hutchinson, unfortunately, out for the season with that nasty broken leg. We've seen Justin Jefferson do some of his best work against this Lions defense over his career. I feel like he kind of always has something dialed up for them. So a big game from Jefferson could float Darnold on its own. I really do like him. Smith was another name I was considering. If you want to go any lower, I think I would consider Daniel Jones if you had to. 5,400. Every dollar counts right now is what I'll say. That's kind of the best thing I could say about Daniel Jones. That, and in each of the last 2 games, 38 and
there's a 3,200 receiver. You'll be fine.
A 3,200 receiver. Now I'm intrigued.
We'll get to it.
They call that a tease in the radio show industry. I like it. All right, so we'll see what happens. Maybe we won't need Daniel Jones because of Devin's receiver, but if you had to go there, 38 and 56 yards on the ground in each of the last 2 games, at least 20 yards rushing in 4 out of 6. He's only 5,400. He should get Malik Neighbors back, which is obviously a big thing for his passing efficiency. So, if you're hunting for like 18 DraftKings points, I think Daniel Jones is not a terrible idea, but I would much rather play Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I don't think Jones would be 5,400 if Malik Neighbors didn't miss the last 2 weeks, but he did, and here we are. So let's move into running backs. And Phil, how are you building out your running backs for your cash game lineup?
Yeah, I think the first guy that I'm looking at is Chuba Hubbard at 6,500. Just clearly underpriced. He's the running back 4 on DraftKings this season cumulatively, and his price is equivalent to running back 16. So you're getting a pretty insane value with Hubbard that I don't think you could pass up. I mean, the guy just gets no respect here. DraftKings priced Isaac Guerendo ahead of Chuba Hubbard, going up against the Chiefs on the assumption that Jordan Mason sits. So it's really just crazy. 4 catches.
Can we talk about that one a little bit?
Yeah.
Guerendo?
No. Can we talk about Hubbard's matchup a little bit against, and sorry to cut you off.
Sure.
Washington, and we talked about it last week with Derrick Henry, where I told everyone to play him. Washington's defense is horrendous, and now they're without Jonathan Allen, who is like their lone defensive tackle who could do anything on that defense. He certainly hasn't lived up to the bill that he has early on in his career, but this defense is quite possibly the worst run defense in football. So I would have, Chuba Hubbard to me is the clear 1-1.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely had that as a note that Washington and Carolina are kind of right there as the two most exploitable run defenses. Just another note about Hubbard. It's not just like the lock for the 20 to 25 touches that you're getting at that price. He's actually been explosive. He's got the fifth most rushes of 10 plus yards in the league this season. So really, really underrated and underpriced. So big yes on Hubbard. Tony Pollard was the other guy that I have penciled in right now, or written in pencil. He's 6,300. He was the chalk last week because he had the matchup against the Colts. He paid it off with about 18 DraftKings points. He's got at least 15 DraftKings points in all but one game this year. Tyjae Spears, I believe, is going to miss this game. So I think we could also bake a couple more targets into the projection for Pollard. And I'm not sure if people, or a lot of people realize, I'm sure Jeff realizes, but Buffalo stinks against the run for like the second straight season. We just saw it with Breece Hall in an island game. We saw it with Derrick Henry the week before that. They're now up to 53% more fantasy points allowed than league average to running backs over the last 3 weeks. I think Pollard's in another really good spot, and there are receivers I want to pay up for. So I'm sticking to that middle range.
Yeah, the only other name for cash that I'll add is Kareem Hunt at 6K. I mean, look, San Francisco's run defense has been pretty good, but they're struggling against pass catching receivers, and I think that I prefer the other two guys that Phil had mentioned, but I think you could do worse than look at Hunt. I think he catches 4 to 5 passes this week, as the Chiefs are desperately looking for receivers who can catch the ball. So certainly don't be afraid of that matchup, even though that they have looked good, but the running backs that they faced so far this year, outside of I guess they have faced. I'm looking at the wrong team. They allowed 86 yards to James Conner, 89 yards and 2 touchdowns to Kyron Williams. So they have been pretty hit or miss throughout the year.
It's expensive. And maybe you want to go wide receivers. 8,200. Saquon Barkley is making his return to New York. And I would have to imagine there's going to be a little bit of motion involved in that game. Is that a consideration for cash at all, or is that just way too far out of the range right now?
If I'm spending 8,200 on a running back, I'm going to keep 100 in my pocket and go with Kyron Williams. I think he's in a better spot than Barkley this week. Though I will say, if ever a revenge narrative were to actually hold some water, it would probably be this week against that Giants team that kind of refused to pay him.
Yeah, what's interesting is the Giants are like a complete reclamation project, because going into the season, we were expecting them to be one of the worst run defenses in the NFL, but they really have been pretty good against the run. So Micah McFadden led the NFL in missed tackles last year as a linebacker, ahead of missed tackle percentage, ahead of corners, ahead of safeties, ahead of et cetera. So the narrative kind of goes both ways. I think that as much as Barkley wants to beat the Giants also want to shut down Barkley. So I hear you. I just think it's more of a GPP play than a cash game play.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think the Giants have done a good job of really kind of controlling tempo, slowing games down, playing to their strengths. I think there are two. We talked early in the week, obviously, about the lack of value that's available right now, but there are 2 injury situations that I'm kind of monitoring at the bottom. First off, Ray Davis at 5,200. If James Cook misses again, I feel like that's as chalk is going to chalk. But then the other one would be Tyler Goodson at 5,400. If you're going to have Trey Sermon's monitoring that injury situation there without Trey Sermon in there and without Jonathan Taylor, those right now look like the early 2 paths to potentially getting some, salary relief or different directions to go. But are those on your radars as well?
Yeah, I think for Ray Davis, if Cook is out, it's how much chalk could a running back chalk wood, whatever that saying is. He would be 70% rostered, like no question.
Goodson is interesting because I think that the Colts are in a good spot for running backs against that Miami defense. The only question I have, I know that they signed or they re-signed Evan Hull last week, and if Sermon is out, I wonder if they see Goodson as someone that they could use on every down, or if they're going to kind of keep him in that scat back role and maybe give Hull some of the work they were giving Sermon. So a little bit of ambiguity there. So again, more of a GPP thing, whereas with Ray Davis, that's a cash game play all the way, given what we saw him do against the Jets and also in the preseason.
All right, wide receivers and Devin, maybe we'll keep that 3,200 discount in your pocket, or if you want to throw it out right now. But where are you looking to build wide receivers in cash game lineups?
Yeah, we'll save it for the end of the show. Watch to the end for value plays where you can find out who the $3,200 player is. It's not pretty. We'll just put it that way. But it's a guy who's going to get targets.
So.
I mean,
I think I got it, but I'll keep it under the hat. I don't want to ruin the.
If you look at the salary, if you look at the salaries and whose role has changed at 3,200, it's not all that difficult to figure out. Okay, so guys, this week, I think Drake London is probably going to be the top guy off the board in this game. That's a potential sneaky shootout. 6,900. He's looked really good over the last couple of weeks. You know, this offense is starting to click with Kirk Cousins coming in, and took him a couple of weeks, but you get 12 targets, 13 targets, and 10 targets over the last 3 games. I mean, that's sort of how I'm looking at receivers on DraftKings, is who's going to get targets that can catch passes, and I think that he's in the prime spot. I'm not paying up, and Phil might talk me into it, but I'm not paying up this week for the high end of wide receivers. I just don't think you need to. Certainly, it's risky to do that, but I think that going in that route is the preferred approach. I don't know what to do with a couple guys, because Michael Pittman is out, and how we think about the Colts situation, because certainly it matters if Joe Flacco or Anthony Richardson is the starting quarterback. I think if Flacco is starting, Josh Downs immediately becomes a target that you should look at, because he's had 9 targets, 12 targets, 9 targets. He didn't practice on Wednesday because of a toe injury, so keep an eye on that. But at 50, where was it? 5,400, I believe. Certainly 57. Certainly a guy that if he can get 10 targets, I'm at least going to be interested in. I'm completely out on Jerry Jeudy. I don't think his role changes with Amari Cooper being out. And that gets me, I'll just say it right now, that gets me to Elijah Moore at 3,200. I think that he's the beneficiary of Amari Cooper being out, and he's the guy that I would want to target to unlock some salary. He hasn't done it this year, but we've seen glimpses where, particularly with Joe Flacco last year, where he had an impact. And I think the Browns are in we need to know what our guys have, and they sort of know what Jerry Jeudy is at this point. They know what David Njoku is. They need to figure out whether Elijah Moore is a guy that they can build around, or if it's a complete rebuild situation at the wide receiver position, because they're in a complete rebuild mode. And Sean Watson's terrible. We know that. But so is the rest of the team, and they need a couple guys to step up.
Phil, do you have other plays that you're looking at?
Yeah, so I'm going to co-sign the Drake London play. You definitely want a piece of that game, and I think that's the piece that you want in cash, because he's been such a picture of consistency recently. I'm going again. It's Wednesday. And I'm hoping he sheds that red non-contact jersey tomorrow. But if he does, I'm locking in Malik Neighbors. Easy to forget, or maybe it's not, but through 4 weeks, he led the NFL in targets and receptions, trailed only Nico Collins in receiving yards, had 3 touchdowns. Even though this is a season-high price for Neighbors, I would argue it's probably still about $500 too low for what he showed through those first 4 weeks. And Philly has been pretty consistently burned by wide receiver ones before they ran into Deshaun Watson last week, of course. In week 1, Jaden Reed had 33 points against them. Both Drake London and Darnell Mooney got over 17 points in week 2. Chris Olave had his best game in week 3 against the Eagles. Mike Evans had 23 in week 4. Then they went on bye, and then they got Cleveland. So I think Neighbors is going to be a target hog. I think he's still affordable enough, given that we haven't really spent up on quarterback and running back just yet. And then the third one for me is Deontay Johnson again at 6,600. I mean, I just can't get the guy out of my cash game lineup. I don't really care that he's in there with Hubbard because the offense runs through those 2 guys in Carolina, and they do have a good matchup. As long as he stays under 7K, I think week in, week out, he's going to be one of the best point per dollar values on DraftKings, especially in the full PPR scoring. Besides that 1 week against Chicago where he struggled and the entire offense struggled, he's got 3 games where he combined for 37 targets, 21 catches, 283 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That same thing I talked about with Hubbard applies with Deontay. He's priced as the wide receiver 18 this week, even though he's the wide receiver 6 since Andy Dalton took over. So that's just to help illustrate the value that you're getting there. I think those are the 3 guys kind of locked and loaded for me in cash games.
So I'm seeing T. Higgins at 6,400, and he's out targeted Jamar Chase for 3 straight weeks, going up against the Browns. The Browns were a little bit more respectable last week, but we've seen the volume available in the Cincinnati passing attack. Is that a direction that you would consider going in cash, or is that a GPP only, or not on the board at all?
I think it's defensible. I'm not rushing to do it myself, just because I think there are better values with maybe a little bit more predictable target volume, but Higgins is not a bad play.
Yeah, he's the wide receiver 8 over the last 3 weeks. So that might be because he played a game and some people had buys. And then I think there are 2 wide receivers at 4,000 that I just think are mispriced right now. And maybe it's because small sample sizes or just questions around there. But Juju Smith-Schuster at 4,000 going up against the 49ers, a game that we mentioned could be pretty interesting. And then Noah Brown at 4,000. I think Noah Brown has locked down the wide receiver 2 role in Washington, led the team in targets last week with 8 targets. I really like that one as kind of stepping into that Carolina-Washington game that we've talked about a couple different times. We can go to tight ends now. And Phil, where are you looking at tight end?
So I like David Njoku, I guess for some of the reasons that Devin might like Elijah more. We're talking about role changes and, who's going to step into that target vacuum that Cooper leaves behind. And, I think last week was really his first healthy game since week 1. We saw Njoku get 7 targets, which was good for a 30% target share. That's massive for a tight end. Unlike Amari Cooper, who was also heavily targeted, 5 out of 7 targets were catchable for Njoku, which is important when this version of Deshaun Watson is the quarterback. Njoku operates in the areas of the field that Watson could still reach accurately with his arm. And I think that the Bengals are a good enough matchup for tight ends. So I'm going there. I think he definitely has overall tight end 1 potential at 4,200. And then there are a couple of other guys that are going to be fine if you need to. Zach Ertz, 3,900, Colby Parkinson, 3,800. These guys are going to be on the field a lot. They're going to get 5 to 8 targets. They're going to catch 4 or 5 of them. They're going to fall down as soon as they catch them. And at tight end, hey, that's the state of things in 2024. We'll take it. But I think Njoku has the same floor with more upside than those guys.
Devin, do you have anything else on your radar?
Yeah, I'm not in on the David Njoku play. I just don't see the downfield passing as much. I think he's more of just like these little 5-6 yard routes, which is a problem. I get the target share and I get the volume, but I think if I'm going to go up that high, I'd rather play Kyle Pitts at 4,500. Not that I'm going to do that, but Pitts has looked better the past 2 weeks. 3 catches for 70 yards last week, and then everybody had a big game 2 weeks ago for the Falcons against, who was that? Tampa Bay. Yes, he had 7 for 88. But I'm not going there. I think Grant Calcaterra is the guy with Dallas Goedert likely out. Calcaterra was a receiving specialist at Oklahoma. He certainly is more than capable to catch the ball in this offense. 3,200 allows me to have some dynamic ability to build the rest of the roster, especially if I go down to Elijah Moore. So I think that certainly taking a chance on a better offense, especially with, it really worries me about, maybe not, but maybe I'm overthinking this, but Nick Chubb back. We can talk about Nick Chubb in the GPP section, but I think he's going to see most of the volume this week. And at 6K, he's certainly a good play. But I think that they're going to run the ball quite heavily or keep Njoku on these short little routes. I don't know.
One thing I'll add to that really quickly is that within the context of the lineup that we've been building, that I've been building, I guess I should say, but me and Devin were pretty closely aligned for the most part. The difference between Njoku and Calcaterra is $900, and that's pretty much exactly what you need to upgrade Daniel Jones to Sam Darnold. So
yeah, I'd rather do that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Might be priced out. I think just going with Brock Bowers at 5,800 against the Rams defense that's allowed the second most points to tight end. That Tucker Kraft game was 2 weeks ago. The 2-touchdown game there was against the Rams. We're seeing Brock Bowers over the last, especially with Devontae Adams out of the lineup, really solidifying himself. And so I think at 5,800 in that matchup, I'm going to find a way to try to get Bowers into the lineup. But all right, make sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to become a Hall of Fame subscriber. Hall of Fame subscribers get access to all DFS content for less than $20 monthly or $95 annually. Or you can check out the GOAT tier. And Devin, have you been doing things with the GOAT tier? I know that we've been doing some private Zoom type meetings with people that have opted into that GOAT tier. And I know that you've been involved in some different things, how we've been able to connect to the audience. And have you done any of that?
Yeah, you get a personalized experience helping people out individually. Certainly, I think that, we're always willing to help you, but, the GOAT tier are people that if we get 50, 100 messages on a Sunday, we're not always going to be able to respond to everybody. So this guarantees a personalized service. We'll have personalized chats with people, help them with more strategic rather than like a quick answer type thing. So if you're really trying to like pick our minds and get into like the details and get some of the logic behind some of these things, I spent 45 minutes on one single question the other day just for trying to help somebody out and wrote a couple hundred words on it. And it's just like, really a good way to learn and connect, and certainly a way to kind of help the channel a little bit as well.
Yeah, and I think that that's fantastic. I think one of the things that why we love where we work is, Joe Bryant having that personal touch, replying to emails himself when they come through. And it's just an extension of that, how we're able to connect with you, the audience, who we appreciate so much. But now we're going to open up the board and we're going to dive into GPP plays. And Phil, why don't you lead us off with quarterbacks that you're looking for GPP plays?
Sure. So the first normal GPP quarterback play that I have is Geno Smith, who we've mentioned already. I do love stacking that game with different pieces of Seattle and Atlanta. Geno, I mean, yeah, give me the guy that has 3 awesome receivers, leads the league in pass attempts and yards, completes 70% of his passes, and has yet to throw for multiple touchdowns, because with those other peripherals, those touchdowns will normalize. And I want to be overweight the field when it happens. I think this is a week that it can. After that, it is officially vomit stack season for me. I've got 2 ugly, ugly names that I will give you. The first one is Aiden O'Connell at 4,800. So the Raiders are facing the Rams. The Rams are off a bye. It looks like Cooper Kupp is trending towards playing. LA is implied to score a healthy 25.5 points. So we could see the Raiders getting blown out for the second straight week. Last week, it didn't amount to much in garbage time because the Raiders and O'Connell were playing against the Steelers defense, but they did throw 40 times. And I think if that happens against the Rams, we're likely to see much better success for O'Connell in that passing game. And he does have a demonstrated ceiling. Last year, when he came on as a rookie at the end of the season, he hit 20-plus DraftKings points in 3 out of his last 4 games and got as high as 28. So it's not out of the question. He's cheap and an easy way to get exposure and correlated exposure to Brock Bowers in tournaments, who you mentioned, Jeff. I think we saw with Devontae Adams out of town and some other wide receiver injuries that they have, that Trey Tucker was on the field for pretty much every snap. So I think that's someone else you could work in for cheap into that type of lineup, run it back with Kyron Williams and fill the rest in from there. And then the other one that, I guess, depending on your perspective, it's either more or less disgusting than Aiden O'Connell, Tyler Huntley at 5,100. So here's the story that you've got to tell yourself for Tyler Huntley, right? He
can't throw the ball.
All right, look, he just got to the team, all right?
He couldn't throw the ball in Baltimore either.
Getting to know those receivers. He's got great receivers in Waddle and Hill. Maybe they're slightly more on the same page. Maybe Mike McDaniel has had a little bit more time to dial up something in the scheme to Huntley's strengths so that he could get the ball into these guys' hands and do something after the catch. Maybe. That's the really thin part of it. The part that's actually got some meat on the bone is that they're playing the Colts, and the Colts have allowed over 300 passing yards to Caleb Williams, Justin Fields, and Trevor Lawrence over a recent 3-game stretch. I know Caleb Williams has come on, but those other guys don't throw the ball very well these days. Huntley could run. He had 40 rushing yards in his first start this season. It's hard to say if he's got a ceiling that could actually win you a GPP, because it's kind of like, even if you win, what do you win? You know, could he get to 25 points? Maybe. And is that going to be enough? Maybe, depending on what else you could do around it. But
do you know where he was cut earlier this season?
Boy, I do, but you'll have to remind me.
He got beat out by Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
That's right.
The story I heard was Dorian Thompson-Robinson was kept around because he made Deshaun Watson feel better about his own play at quarterback. So that was the story that I heard.
Oh, and that's why they had to pay Jameis.
That's why they had to keep Dorian Thompson-Robinson around, and that's why Jameson is not allowed to touch the field.
I hate this team so much.
But that's all I got. What do you got, Devin?
Matt Stafford, 5,600. If he gets Cooper Kupp back, no one's really going to be on him. But I'm surprised at his initial roster percentage being as low as it is. Is there an injury that I don't know about? I don't know. I like this Houston-Green Bay game. And I think I like the Houston side of it. I think CJ Stroud is depending on the weather in Green Bay, which is always, we're getting into that point of the year, a little bit murky, but I think Stroud could at least be intriguing. Jared Goff is probably my top GPP play. So Minnesota, like, yeah, they're a really good team, but if you look at their passing statistics, they're allowing the second most passing yards per game this season. They've allowed 319 to Brock Purdy. They allowed 294 to C.J. Stroud and Davis Mills, 389 and 4 to Jordan Love. So I think that there's an opportunity here for Goff. Certainly, I think that Darnold is a little bit safer and you get a little bit of a discount there, which is why I preferred him in cash. But I think that Goff is certainly a play that you could justify this week. And then a special 4,900 Deshaun Watson. No, I'm just kidding. Do not play Deshaun Watson. People are still going to because of the name. Like right now, he's 5% rostered and sub 5K, but don't do it.
Talk about ceilings for winning a GPP. 6,000 Anthony Richardson might have a ceiling to win a GPP.
How healthy is he? Is just like, are they just keeping him out because Flacco gives them the best chance to win? Are they waiting for him to be 100% healthy? If you told me you could get 100% healthy Anthony Richardson, I'm in. I don't know. And I guess that's the narrative you're buying, is that you're thinking he's going to be 100% healthy.
Yeah, I get that. I do enjoy the Tyler Huntley play, though. That is right up my disgusting alley. All right, let's hit some running backs. And Devin, we talked about Saquon Barkley maybe a little bit. Is that a DPP running back play here that you're kind of buying into that, or are you going other directions?
No, for sure. Saquon's in there. And for all the reasons that I think you had mentioned earlier on in this show, has as much upside at the running back position as anyone. Nick Chubb is going to be in my GPPs this week. He's 6K. There's a chance that Jerome Ford is out, right? So he's out for a couple weeks. The Browns have no running game. Jerome Ford's awful. Deontay Foreman's horrible. They got nothing. Why are they bringing Nick Chubb back at 1-5 unless he's 100% healthy? What's the point? You just traded Amari Cooper. You really going to run out a not fully healed Nick Chubb? No, of course you're not. There's a chance that Nick Chubb is fully healed, fully ready, 1% rostered, 6K, and gets 20 touches. And we're all just like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like, of course, it's Nick Chubb. So at 1% rostered, I think Nick Chubb is certainly a great play this week. Looking elsewhere, there's really like a lot of options. I think Tony Pollard is a really good play this week for all the reasons that we mentioned. Chuba Hubbard certainly in play. Looking down the board a little bit, you could go with Brian Robinson at 6,400 if he's healthy. Going up against Carolina, the committee there is going to worry people. But I think that, going up against that Carolina defense, all the running backs should be in consideration. And then the last guy I'll throw out there, I like Devin Achane at 6,700 a lot more than I like Snoop Huntley because Indy can't stop either the pass or the run. And I think that Miami could certainly steal a game by giving it to Achane like 20 times, 22 times.
Or getting it to him on a screen pass, and then it brings Huntley along for the ride, baby.
Yeah, one screen pass could save Achane's day, and it's certainly not getting Huntley to value. But go on.
All right, so Brian Robinson was on my list. I think I would probably see him in cash game consideration this week had it not been for the knee injury. That's ruined his last 2 weeks and knocked him out of that game, week 5 game early. So we're getting an ownership discount here due to that uncertainty. But I believe he did practice today. That's a good sign, being that it's Wednesday. So if he's in for his normal workload, even splitting with Austin Eckler, I'm perfectly fine with that. I think he's got easy multi-touchdown upside given the matchup, and he could get to 100 yards, even if he only touches the ball maybe 15 times. Kyron Williams, who I thought was kind of like a luxury cash game play. I think he's got the profile that we look for in GPP running backs. His team is favored by more than a touchdown. I believe they are at home. Yes, they are at home. And they're implied to score more than 24 points. This Raiders defense made Najee Harris look like Bo Jackson on that one play, his touchdown run last week. So I think that Kyron Williams could certainly be the running back one on the slate. He'll be owned, I think for sure, but I can't fit him in cash, and I got to play him somewhere. So tournaments it is. And then I'm monitoring the Vikings running back situation, not because Detroit is a great matchup for running backs, but because the Vikings are at home, they're rested, and that game environment, I think, could lift the running backs more so than the matchup. And I think that people won't play them because of the matchup and the uncertainty with the injury. So hopefully it's Aaron Jones, because he's the one of these two guys between him and Ty Chandler that we know is any good. But he didn't practice today. He's supposedly going to practice tomorrow. Hip injury for a running back isn't a great thing. So we'll see what happens. If it's Ty Chandler at 5,600, I think you're getting good value there. I don't know if they're going to work in Cam Akers all that much in his first week back in Minnesota. And given enough touches, I think Chandler will eventually make at least one big play as a runner or as a pass catcher, enough to pay it off. So keeping my eye on Aaron Jones for sure.
Chase Brown at 5,900, I think, is probably the one that I'm thinking about as well. And that's kind of buying into the Browns just being continuing the train wreck, and maybe the Bengals break it open on them. And Brown, I think, has the opportunity to score multiple touchdowns at that price point. We did see Bijan Robinson a little bit last week against Carolina, obviously 95 or 105 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, we saw Tyler Algier with 95 rushing yards, and actually I think Bijan had the 95 and Algier was at the 105, but Algier with the 105 and a touchdown. I mean, either way, like that might be a fun way to play. Algier's price is low enough. I don't know that you really want to play a backup running back in a GPP play, but at the same time, that Seattle game, we talked about that being a potential shootout. And we also saw Bijan Robinson look much better last week. So I think that could be consideration. That's about all I've got on running backs. We can dive into wide receivers. We've already revealed the $3,200 key to your lineup this week, but Devin, what else do you have at wide receivers for GPP plays?
I think you might be overstating it by saying the key to your lineup. I think it's a way to build a lineup that allows you to, on Thursday, if value doesn't open up. DK Metcalf, I think, is at least intriguing. His price has come down a little bit to 6,800. 11 targets last week, and he looked out of sync. He only caught 3 of them, but he was going up against San Francisco. I mean, this is a guy who had 3 straight 100-yard games. We know that he can have as big of a game as just about anybody. So he's certainly in consideration. I don't mind the T. Higgins call that was brought up in cash. He's certainly in play this week and almost every week. Cooper Kupp, kind of a similar mindset to Nick Chubb as far as like no one's going to want to play him coming off the injury, but certainly a stackable option and a good pivot off of Kyron Williams. Going down the list a little bit, I think A.J. Brown is the other guy that I had on my list. The Giants have been really good against wide receivers this year, but Brown looked really good in his return last week, so I think that's really encouraging. This Eagles offense didn't have a huge game, but both Brown and Devonta Smith both had an impact. So certainly looking in that direction, going up against the Giants. And then I think that's Adonai Mitchell at 3,700 if Joe Flacco starts is certainly intriguing as well.
Yeah, give me Justin Jefferson at 8,500 as my top GPP wide receiver. And this is probably like really dumb reasoning, but my brain just won't let me forget those two Nick Mullins games against the Lions late last season where Justin Jefferson just absolutely shredded them. 26 points in the first matchup, 36 in the second. Going back to his rookie year in 2022, Jefferson had another 33-point game against the Lions. I think he just likes playing against that powder blue laundry. So he could just have their number, and I could see him being the guy that really breaks the slate at wide receiver. And we know we like pairing him with Darnold from what we talked about in cash games. Here's another one. I guess it kind of fits with my vomit quarterbacks. I'm going to give you a 3K crapper wide receiver. Mr. Jalen Coker at 3,000. We're going pretty deep here, but Coker got an opportunity in week 5 when Xavier Legette went out of the game, and he went 4 for 68 in that game. And the coaching staff must have liked what they saw because he took Jonathan Mingo's job last week as a starter in 3 wide receiver sets. He ran 1 fewer route and had 1 fewer target than Legette. We're going to see Hubbard and Deontay Johnson as popular plays. Coker sets up as leverage. He is a min-priced pivot play. So he's someone that I'm looking at for salary relief, who I think could get you to 10 DraftKings points because he'll be on the field enough to do it.
The problem with Jalen Coker is I see Jay Coker and as an initial, and I think of Jake Coker, who was like the awful Alabama quarterback in like the mid 2000s or early 2010s, and I'm like, I don't know about that one, but I gotta get past that. I'm talking to Jeff on the side, and he's my therapist to get rid of those bad memories.
Yep, can't have the Coker bias hold you back in DFS this week. I agree with DK Metcalf that Devin said he would be my preferred stacking partner for Geno Smith, who I like. I think he's got a pretty good chance of getting back to that 25 to 30 DraftKings points range. And the only other note that I've got here is the Houston wide receivers. Tank Dell at 6,500, Stephon Diggs at 7,700. I think they both project as kind of middling insofar as ownership goes, despite the fact that the targets have consolidated in Houston with Nico Collins out of the lineup. So if Jordan Love and Green Bay's offense kind of has one of those weeks that we know they're capable of, or maybe even if they don't, because Devin mentioned that he liked the spot for CJ Stroud. These two guys, Dell and Diggs, kind of split the production last week, but if one of them separates and most of the production ends up one way or the other, both of those guys have the talent to finish near the top of the wide receiver board. So I'm planning on splitting some exposure to each of those guys and maybe playing them as one-offs in a lot of lineups.
The Vikings have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. The Lions have allowed the 4th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. And obviously, like Phil mentioned, your eyes get drawn to Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown sitting there at the top. Playing Jameson Williams and Jordan Addison might be an interesting pivot to get into the kind of maybe that shootout and a much, much lower price point with still having some pretty high ceiling against defenses that have been exploited by wide receivers playing off of against each other. So that's kind of interesting to me. Romeo Doubs came back last week, had those 2 touchdown catches. Jaden Reed, I'm not sure his status, if he's in or out, but that might be an opportunity that opens up for Doubs to kind of emerge as maybe the number 1 target this week for Jordan Love. And then Jordan Whittington at 4,800. And a lot of talk is going to be a lot of pictures, thoughts on Cooper Kupp coming back. But Whittington, I think even with Kupp coming back, can still be very, very involved. And if Kupp's limited, you could see kind of Kupp serving as the decoy, easing his way back in, and Whittington just being under the radar and getting a ton of volume against a Raiders defense that can be exploitable for the Rams passing attack. Those are the only ones that I'm kind of looking at. Do we have any tight ends that we're kind of either paying up for or just going to the bottom of the barrel?
For me, this is where you pay up. Travis Kelce at 6,300 has 19 targets in 2 games since Rashee Rice got hurt. 16 DraftKings points in both games. There's simply not that many tight ends that are giving you that at this point. We know that he's a favorite red zone threat of Patrick Mahomes, even though he hasn't had any touchdowns this year. So I think it's safe to say that's coming, given the volume that he's getting now. So I would look at Kelce, and you mentioned the other obvious pay up option, who I think more people are going to play, and that's Brock Bowers at 5,800. And that's justified that more people are going to play him, by the way. He's a better play. He's playing wide receiver, like straight up, full stop. That's how the team's using him. And he's the guy commanding targets in that passing game. So you're really not getting tight end usage like that from any other player in the league. So I think you definitely have to have some exposure to Bowers. And that Rams defense is terrible to the point that I actually want to play Aiden O'Connell this week. So that kind of tells you everything that you need to know about the matchup.
Yeah, the only other guy I have is Dalton Schultz. So 8 targets last week with no Nico Collins. They're low volume targets, but if he can get some targets in the red zone, certainly if he finds a touchdown, I think he's a guy that should be in a relatively high scoring game and is pretty cheap. So I think he's a guy that I'm going to be looking at. And then I'm mostly just going to be playing Grant Calcaterra. This is a guy who came out at Oklahoma, had big upside as a receiver, didn't really put it all together, couldn't always stay healthy, but he averaged 14 yards per reception at Oklahoma. So certainly has the athletic ability when he catches the ball to be a downfield threat.
Yeah, Calcaterra was kind of following up Mark Andrews and was supposed to be the heir apparent there, but you mentioned the injuries. I think he finished his career at Tulsa for
SMU.
Maybe one or SMU. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for like a year or two. And so that was kind of, and now we've seen him emerge here in year 3 of his career. Phil, what's your favorite stack of the week?
All right. So I already gave the people one, so that one doesn't count. That was Aiden O'Connell, Brock Bowers, Trey Tucker with Kyron Williams coming back. I mentioned that I like the Geno Metcalf stack with a piece from Atlanta. You could go either London or Mooney as the bring back. One thing that I think is going to go overlooked with the Seahawks is that Kenneth Walker has 15 catches over his last 2 games. This is not like the Kenneth Walker role that we're used to in is it Ryan Grubb's offense? The new offensive coordinator there. So I think that it is viable and will get you to a unique lineup to stack Kenneth Walker with Geno Smith and DK Metcalf and do a Seattle double.
It's kind of a happy learned how to putt. Uh-oh.
Exactly.
I like that call out. That was going to be mine, and I'll think of another one. But Devin, what is yours?
Let's go with Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jordan Addison. I think Goff is a big position. Certainly people are going to be looking at Justin Jefferson, but I think this game shoots out, and I'm trying to get unique at it, and this is the way that I'm approaching it.
Yeah, I think mine's going to be the Daniel Jones, Malik Neighbors with Saquon Barkley coming back, and just the emotion, the upside with Neighbors, what Jones can potentially give you at quarterback at 5,400, and then getting that play on Barkley and just kind of stepping all the way into that with the Giants wanting to show off their new weapon, the Eagles being exploitable at wide receiver, and then all the emotion from Saquon Barkley coming the other direction. I like that storyline quite a bit, and that would be mine. But we can go into discount plays of the week. Devin, what's your favorite discount play of the week?
Tell you who's not a discount play, Jeff, and that's my internet company. They gotta get it figured out, man. Elijah Moore, 3,200. I think that he's the guy that they're gonna look towards to build around. Certainly, I think Nick Chubb could have a big game. This is kind of a, let's put it this way. It's 1-5 Cincinnati versus 1-5 Cleveland. I think Cleveland loses this game because I have them projected to be 2-15 this season. But you could see some real changes in Cleveland after this week. I don't think the pressure was on last week. If they don't look competent this week, I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Vrabel is the coach by the end of week 10. He's a consultant to the owner of the Cleveland Browns right now. Buckeye, get people to care about the rest of the season. I could see it.
I like that prediction. Phil, what's yours?
So I'm going to take a Raiders wide receiver here. Jacoby Myers did not practice again today, so I'm going to take that as a bad sign for his availability. Devontae Adams is predictably a New York Jet. There's going to be some wide receivers that are going to be on the field for every snap in this game where I like the Raiders in garbage time. So Trey Tucker, 4,200 is one. He's probably the more skilled player of the two. And then there's the slot guy, DJ Turner at 3,400, who, again, he's going to be on the field and he might catch a couple passes.
Do you like Tucker? Because, to me, Aiden O'Connell is a guy who sort of just targets his, stares down receivers. And in the 2 games that Tucker has played with O'Connell, he had 2 for 18 and 0 for 0. That worries me.
Yes. I would feel a lot better about that call if Gardner Minshew was still the quarterback, but I mean,
I almost prefer Turner.
Literally, Tucker was on the field for every single solitary snap last week.
Yeah, but who was the guy in the Chargers that was on the team forever that would have 95% snap share? One of those just random guys, but they never actually produced anything. Give me DJ Turner at 3,400. He had 5 targets in the second half with O'Connell, 5 targets in the second half with O'Connell. One of those is a penalty, so that's why it's only showing 4 for the game, and then he had 4 targets last week. I just don't know what Trey Tucker's role is in this offense right
now. The Raiders had 2 running backs and the backup tight end, and it's not Michael Mayer, backup tight end, that had more targets than any wide receiver last week. And those running backs are Alexander Mattison and Amir Abdullah. So that tells me everything I know about that passing attack. I think it's just Brock Bowers is the only person coming close to my lineup, but I like the call out there. And then I think that there is upside. Mine might be a little injury contingent on we're waiting to see what Tommy Tremble is able to make it back from that scary hit. But Jatavian Sanders at 2,900, 7 targets last week, 5 catches, 49 yards. You kind of talk about this Carolina-Washington game being one that we want pieces of as well. And I do like the Jalen Coker call out by you, Phil, in the GPP section. Sanders, to me, kind of 2,900 is just really under the radar at a potential tight end that can get you, especially if you were to get into the end zone, but a 10-point play there and 3-4x times value pretty easily. But that's mine. That's what we've got for this week for week 7. Devin, do you have any good, kind words for the people or even mean words for the people? I know that the Browns have you in a mood, but what do you have for our listeners here?
I'm in a great mood. Cracking FanDuel is 5-1 this year in cash games with our primary cash game lineup. If you're struggling, we've been saying it all year, winning, and you want detailed FanDuel picks, detailed FanDuel analysis, my lineup that I'm personally playing with a Sunday morning update for the cost of a subscription for Football Guys, it is the best deal in the industry. I mean, other sites are charging hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Here it's $20 a month. skip a meal.
You
That's
really
it.
get 2 meals after reading.
Good luck, everybody. Yeah, you get put 20 in, get 40 back. Pretty easy.